I'm Mike Bracken. I'm the Executive Director for Digital for GDS, and I'd like to thank you for attending this morning and listening to me and give an update about what we've been doing digitally. I'm going to try and run through this quite quickly to give you a scale of what we've been doing in the last year, and then quite happy at the end of this to take some questions, indeed any questions, and see if I can help you out. So, should we get cracking? Firstly, a couple of questions. Who's a civil servant? Who's not a civil servant? Okay. All right. Who's on Twitter? Who's on Twitter now? That's my hashtag. If you've got a nice thing to say, that's where it is. If not, don't bother. Okay, let's get cracking. Okay. This time last year, I don't think we were on this floor last year. We were in a building with sort of glass behind it. We could actually hear each other. But this time last year, I gave a presentation really talking about our objectives and what we're trying to achieve, the Digital by Default agenda. And so what I thought I'd do is, it's only polite to turn up and talk about how we've got on. So we promised a lot last year. I'll touch on what we promised briefly, and I want to give you an update on where we've got to, and also talk a little bit about the challenges ahead. So we promised a lot last year, and we're about to promise a lot more. So let's examine our record so far. I should say before we do this, all the stuff we do, or very nearly all the stuff we do, is in the public domain. A lot of it's on our blog, so we should be held up as a sort of model of transparency, I very much hope. So if you've got any questions that you can't find out about, do let us know. Right, let's go back to our core mission. In 2011, at the start of 2011, Martha Lane Fox, the digital champion for the UK, wrote a series of letters to Francis Moore, the Minister of the Cabinet Office, and that resulted in a report called Digital by Default, which I see now the Post Office have attempted to trademark this morning, so good for them. And that report really, if you boil it down, says four things. Gives us a mission, really, four things you've got to do. The first is to create a central government digital estate. Doesn't sound too much, but actually that's quite revolutionary, particularly in a federated system of government, because we've never had one of those before. Then to fix publishing, to sort out 15 years of somewhat indiscriminate web publishing. Then to fix transactions, and then finally go wholesale. That's get a lot of this stuff out of government, feed the data economy, and get it where users are. So we're 2 years in. I started 2 years ago on Friday. I was a young man then. And let's just examine the record of where we got to. So the first bit is GovUK. This is fixed publishing. So what is GovUK? It's a single place for government services and information online. Who's used GovUK? Who think? Keep your hand up. Think it's fantastic? Yeah, great. It's simpler, clearer, and faster services for UK businesses and citizens. That's why it exists. We're not there yet. Still got a lot of work to get our agencies online. We launched in October. And users seem to like it. We've got lots of stats and lots of evidence, but crucially, regardless of which statistic we put up, the point about GovUK is that we change it almost instantaneously based on user feedback. So if we find out people aren't getting what they need, we change it. That's in very stark contrast to what preceded. And our testing suggests that tasks are quicker. It's all about getting tasks. Occasionally some people put to me saying, I've looked at some stats and people aren't staying as long as they used to on other stuff. It's like, that's good, that's really quite good. Give people what they want, let them get on with their lives. So it's not just us saying it, other people have said nice things as well. Anyone know what this is? Yeah, or as it's more commonly known, the thing that didn't win the Design of the Year award, because we did. So it's always nice to beat the Olympics at something. This is Thomas Heatherwick's Cauldron. I've got to say, he took it very well when we won the Design of the Year award. And why are we bragging about that? Well, we're not really bragging, we're just having a joke at his expense. But the interesting thing about that is that's an award you can't enter, you're selected. So I was delighted when the design community selected us for Design of the Year, because user-centered design is something we've really majored on with GovUK. Back to the knitting. More importantly, in 5 months we moved 24 ministerial departments onto gov.uk. Anyone here work in a central government department in Whitehall? So you know how quick that is, that 5 months, because we move at lightning generally. So, getting stuff on board a single platform, that was a work of art. And that's the work of a lot of people all around government. Inside government, this is the part of gov.uk that tells you how government works and what it does. At the moment we have 24 departments, as I say, and 28 of over 300 arm's length bodies and agencies are yet to go in the next 12 months. So let me give you an idea of the size and scale of that task. I'm, for my sins, have been involved in some quite large web publishing and digital publishing operations before. This dwarfs them in terms of size. 116,000 documents archived, 275,000 redirections. Today, GovUK has about 134,000 distinct URLs. That's not nothing to map all that over. Are there some gaps in there? Will there be some errors? You guess so with that amount, but the crucial thing is we can fix them quite quickly. Money, we'll save around £50 million a year. We've saved that already. These are audited, and we make it easier to find out and understand what government's doing. Because government works in a sort of quite linear way. I mean, I'm 2 years into government, as I say, and everyone knows what government does, apart from the people who don't, and that's a sort of thing, something that's lost on us as civil servants. It's pretty obvious that HMRC is the organisation that deals with your tax and DVLA deals with your driving licence. But who deals with gangs? Well, the answer is we all do. DWP, of course, deals with gangs, as does the Youth Justice Board, as does the Home Office, as does the other part of the Home Office, as does the Department for Education. There's a simple point here, is that most things that users want to use don't fit neatly into a department or agency structure. These gangs are youth, crime, employment, health, social issue. Well, it's all of the above. It's a people issue. It's all about users. It's not about how we structure ourselves in government. Therefore, the naming convention of Marsham Street and Victoria Street and Whitehall shouldn't necessarily reflect how we service and how we provide information and transactions to our end users. Our users want to find stuff out and do stuff, and we need to organise ourselves around their needs, not around our structure. Anyone guess at the average lifetime of an organisation in government? Average lifetime of a department, a departmental name or an agency name is 5.7 years. So think about that. Every 5.7 years we throw away all our legacy, give it a new brand and have to build up all that Google juice and all that stuff again. That's crazy. What people want is persistence. So we now have a consistent and clear set of policy pages. This is now what our services on gangs look like. And you can find all that information that was on those other places in there. It's a single point for end users. That, however, is the easy stuff. Where we're up to right now is we're working on transactions and identity. So phase 1, set up GDS. We did that in 2011. Phase 2, fix publishing. GovUK is out the door. It's working well. We've still got ways to go. Phase 3, fix transactions. Most people, when they deal with government, are looking for a transaction. I'll come to some numbers in a while. Can anyone guess the number of transactions we have in government? Anyone guess the number of transactions we have central government? 1.3 billion. And every single one of those is an opportunity to either delight or put off users of our services. So let's look at this. In November 2012, we published a government digital strategy outlining our ambitions for transactions. What's so striking about that date is that date comes after we delivered GovUK. Deliver first, strategize later. Government is replete with very large documents that no one ever reads because we put a lot of time in writing perfectly formed policy documents and strategies and yet fail to deliver. So we deliver first. And in that strategy, it's hard and actionable. It's a web service. There are 14 hard actions within that, and recommend that you have a look at those. And what we did when we published that is there's an inherent challenge, or actually an explicit challenge in that strategy to our departments to say, well, look, can you look at your transactions and put up some of the larger transactions for complete end-to-end transformation? And these are those. At the moment we have 25 transactions in our portfolio in 14 agencies and 8 departments that are up for complete end-to-end transformation in the next 2 years. We named those in January. You can see them on the departmental strategies, which are all published on our blog and from our blog, and actually we bring them together under one programme, which we kicked off in January, called Sprint. This is the slide that you can't read, but for those of you, to give you a quick run through of this, so the 8 major transactional departments, and this isn't to downplay the work we do with other departments, they're mostly policy-led, but our transactional department's business, so there's a lot of agencies there, Intellectual Property Office, Land Registry, Student Loans Company, complete Ministry of Justice service as part of their transformations. That's Prison Service, Courts and Tribunals, Office of the Public Guardian, which beta went live yesterday, or this morning actually. DEFRA, complete end-to-end transformation of how the Rural Payments Agency work and how farmers can, 105,000 farmers in this country can deal with the state digitally to get money from European funds. Department of Work and Pensions, Universal Credit being the biggest example. Home Office, border agencies, visas, passports and disclosures and borrowing services. Department of Transport, that's full end-to-end transformation of DVLA, making the DVLA the motoring centre, the digital centre for motoring services in the UK. HM Revenue and Customs, 4 major services there looking at PAYE online, self-assessment, My Business Taxes and so on. And Cabinet Office, because we deal with the democratic services, arguably the most important, registering to vote. In a democracy you can't get a much more important transaction than that. These are important stuff. They're very big. They're number 25 of the top 50 transactions government have, and we're having a go at changing these digitally end-to-end way. And what they will do, they'll transform most of our transactions. Here's the numbers. We have 1.3 billion transactions in government across around 660 services. What this slide tells you is that we have an incredibly long chain of transactions. Government isn't very big. We have to get over ourselves. Everyone says government's really big. It's not really big. It's very broad. There's lots of it, lots of small bits. But computationally and in terms of service delivery, it is not big. We are not a big organisation. I was talking recently to the CIO of one of our telcos in this company, came in our office and saw that slide. He said, oh, that's interesting, 1.3 billion transactions. So that's the same number of transactions we have every week. I was like, okay, it gives you an idea. The point about it, they only have about 40 transactions. We have 662. So we have got lots of smaller transactions. Of the top 50, the 25 I outlined account for, the top 50 account for 97% of volume. And actually stamp duty accounts for about a quarter of them. So whilst important, they're not big computationally. And we have a very, very long blue line. If that map were to scale, it would be somewhere behind me. And I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but many of you might know what the least used transaction we have in government is, which is a license to be buried at sea. We're not in a rush to digitise that one. The 10 people who used it last year can just about do with a piece of paper. Why are we doing that? Well, it's because it's important, and because user needs, first and foremost, make us look at our big stuff. But it's also about this. We know that the metrics around digital delivery are much more attractive than the current other channels. Our digital strategy isn't a multi-channel strategy, it's a digital by default strategy. It's getting users to use services because they want to make those services so attractive that users want to use them. And how we do it is really important. Those of you trapped in the top box will be familiar with it. This is how generally we approach anything that resembles a digital service. Firstly, we don't call it a digital service in government, we call it an IT project. And digital services are not IT projects. IT projects are about reforming IT. We're about reforming public services. And in a conventional project, what we say is we'll go and write a policy, and that can take a year, and then capture requirements, and that can take up to a year. We don't really capture them, we imprison them really, and then we write massive documents with them on, and then we put them out to tender. That takes forever, and then they get developed and we get something back. And by the time it's revealed, it looks nothing like the thing we wanted to, but crucially, in the world we live in, the user needs have far outstripped the thing that's delivered back to us, often at great expense. So we've got to go to the bottom level and do it this way. We built GovUK and everything else we do this way. We have a discovery period, generally 12 weeks. GovUK started off 12 people in a room for 12 weeks, came up with something, went and got a small amount of money, turned that into an alpha, grew it a bit more, turned it into a beta, and then finally moved live. The difference between the two things, at the top one, when you go live at the top one, it's the day you turn it on and everyone sees it for the first time. Everyone goes, oh, I'm not so sure about that. This bottom one, it's been live all the way through that with increasing numbers of users. You just turn the other stuff off. It's a much better way of launching stuff. You can find out more about this in the Digital by Default Service Manual. I said at the start of this, everything that we do is in the open. And a civil servant or supplier or anyone who's just generally interested, go and look at the service manual because it tells you and shows you how to do stuff. We are a small bit at the heart of central government, we're in the right place, but government is a federated place. And the browser must be the way that we communicate with each other, not paper. So everything that we do is on this resource. Let's take a look at some of these work we've been doing. Let's look at one of our alphas with the Rural Payments Agency. It's a good example of the changes we can make and how quickly we can do it. This is the new service. It replaces an awful lot of paper that farmers get that have to, you know, look at their landholding and see what's on each bit of land. It's a simple service, and you can use it from an end to end, where you can go in, you can look at your farm, you can select what's on it, you can then continue to take that all the way through to publishing the data, getting the data service back to you. You can use it on a mobile. It's very simple. The interesting thing about that is that the first prototype of that took 8 weeks, whereas building the requirements documents took a year and took several millions of pounds, whereas the prototype took 6 people in a room, 8 weeks, got everyone behind it, and suddenly the whole program's working in a much more efficient way. We'll have more examples to show you soon. On July the 17th, we'll be revealing some of those at Sprint Alpha with our perm-secs and ministers. Let's talk a little bit about one that went live yesterday. This is the lasting powers of attorney. I'll pause for a minute and just talk about this. Everyone use the lasting powers of attorney? The Office of Public Guardian used it? Okay, was it a good experience? Thank you. It's not a good experience. It's a piece of paper you have to sign 5 times, which is virtually the same. The thing about lasting powers of attorney, it's a thing that you have to do to transfer assets. So if someone dies, or you have someone who dies intestate, or a relative with dementia, that's a typical user need of why you need that service. As at that time of your life, the last thing you want to be doing is having a difficult process dealing with the state. You want it to be really, really quick. So we've made that service a digital service. You can go on, you can do it quickly. There still requires a wet signature. You do have to do a little bit of printing, but we've taken about 3/4 of the paper and the process out of that really quickly. Why is that important? Why are we doing this one as one of the first? Because it's something that only government can do. Right? We have to do the stuff that really, really matters. There's a load of stuff that government does that can sort of be done elsewhere, but the stuff that only government can do. Tax, health, welfare, benefits, this sort of stuff. And that's why we concentrate on these. It's not just about programs, though, it's about people. You all, of course, have outstanding technology at your disposal. Yeah? Is anyone who likes the stuff they've been given? It's pretty damning, isn't it? It's a 6.5 billion supply chain for technology in central government. Just say that again, 6.5 billion pounds supply chain, and yet when I asked you who likes their technology that they receive as users, not one person in this audience put up their hand. That is not good enough. And the reason it's not good enough is not just because you're dissatisfied with your technology, it's because we can have no hope of providing outstanding digital services if the very tools at our disposal don't allow us to create those services for our users. So one of the things we have to be is to sort that out. Recently in GDS we took on the CIO structure in central government, and later this year we'll be coming back with some plans to roll out some better kit. I can't promise you it'll happen quickly. We've been 15 years to engineer ourselves into this position, and it's going to take a little while to get us out of it. But we have got to get you using better technology, better tools and better kit so you can engage with users of our services. We're growing capability within the civil service to deliver this transformation. We've created a digital recruitment hub to get the right people in and across government. We have some great people in government. We have many great people, and many of those people are frustrated because they can't do the job they were hired to do. But also we are missing a generation of digital and technologist people who, by virtue of our sort of relentless commitment to outsourcing the last 15 years, we've let leave the building, and we need to get some of those back in. People like these. And these are the types of roles and people that maybe people in this audience, I very much hope there are, but we need more of these type of people in government. The age of the generalist technologist is over. We have to get people with more specialist skills and crucially more experience. The great thing about many of these roles is you can learn them quite quickly. There is a massive opportunity for skills transfer and for people to pick up where they are now and reset their careers around some of these roles, and we have to do that in central government. So this is digital transformation throughout the civil service and crucially throughout the country. I'm not from London, I dare say many of you aren't either. We work here because that's what Whitehall needs us to be in the first few years, but crucially the transformation of government will happen where those blue dots are around the country. So have a look at the Government Service Design Manual. It'll show you how we work from alphas to betas to going live. It'll show you the skills we need and the tools and techniques. But crucially at the heart of that is a conversation. It's a conversation between all the people in government working to create great digital services. Read the government digital strategy and the departmental strategies. They are easy to read, they're hard and actionable, it's not a very long document, you can get to it very quickly. Find out what your department is doing. You have a digital leader in every department, and indeed many of your agencies are now stepping up to lead the work on digital transformation. And if you can't find any of that, look on our blog, because we try and publish everything that we do in the round, and we're very much open to a conversation at any point, because we're here to help. Is that always joking government? We're from the centre to here to help, but we can't do this with a small group in the central government. We've all got to do it together. That should be it from me. Thanks very much. I don't know, are we doing any questions? I'm looking around. Is there any questions? Hello. If you shout, I'll repeat your question. How about that? Yes? The question was, how does Digital Recruitment Hub work? And how will that work with sort of efficiencies and looking for savings in departments? We've really just started the recruitment hub. There are some standard jobs, some templates, and we're bringing in new types of recruiters to help us find new people in. But crucially, we're also using the people we have to bring in the skill sets that they have. The current generation of technologists and digital people generally are motivated by peer review and by what they work on. So we have to appeal to those two characteristics first and foremost. So how we recruit and how we bring people in has to fundamentally change. The other part of that is we're working with a different supplier base, and later this year you'll see a digital service framework to get a different class and calibre of suppliers into the UK, so we can bring those new skills in a bigger number. So one of the things we've managed to do in the UK is not make enough incentives for the generation of digital companies to work with us in government. Go across this city to Tech City in London, in Bristol, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle. We had outstanding digital talent in the UK. And yet, because of our procurement setup and because of the way we've dealt with a very small number of very big companies, we've really precluded many of those companies from working with us. So that's another route we'll get these skills in. And then indeed, we've done that within GDS. So that's the two mechanisms that we'll bring them in via procurement, by different sorts of procurement and tendering, and by different sorts of recruitment. In terms of how that will work with department stuff, that's obviously on a departmental by department basis, but one of the things that we're very keen to make a move on now is skills transfer. It's getting existing people to look at jobs like service management, to look at product design, service design and so on, so we can transfer the internal knowledge that we have right now. Hello? Age of austerity, we haven't got any microphones, so you're going to have to shout. Okay. Mm-hmm. We have a plan every day, which is to listen to it and address that. I mean, we have a lot of noise. Some of that noise is valid, because it's a massive estate. Some of it is not valid and driven by some supplier interest who had previous contracts with Business Link. The evidence is there for everyone to see, which is, you know, at £35 million a year for a Business Link contract. I think everyone can see that the lack of value for money for the end user there, and there are many suppliers who are caught up in that who clearly, you know, are not thrilled that that contract has gone, and yet the evidence coming from users, whether they business community or elsewhere, is showing us that the user experience is improving. It's not perfect, we have to make it better, so we have a constant stream of requests coming in which we act on. On average, we make a change to that platform every hour and a quarter based on user feedback. I think overall there's a lot of noise around the SME community. In government, one of the things we're working on with colleagues is to make a much more compelling offer to that community, because it speaks with many heads. Obviously there's lots of different voices there, but overall we now have a system which responds to that conversation within the hour, rather than puts it in a contract which is structurally can't respond within 3 months. So I think that's got to be a better deal for anyone in that community. Hello? Mm-hmm. Sure. So the question is, how do you present sort of broken or imperfect processes from being transposed into a digital thing? It's a great question, because one of the things about the first generation of digital transactions that we tried at government is, that classic thing where we take a form, right, put the form online, and actually the problem is the form, right? So, Amazon didn't start by going, how can we make this site look exactly like a bookshop? They went like, well, what do books look like online? British Airways didn't say, how can we make this site like a travel agency? You have to have a service which is appropriate for the mechanism in which you're delivering. That's digital. And that's why some of those jobs you've seen, people who are looking at service design, user experience, we start off with an absolute blank sheet going like, what are we trying to do here? What are the policy objectives? But first and foremost, what are the user objectives? What are the user trying to get? And more often than not, transposing an existing form, is not the right thing to do. So when we talk about digital transformation, we're not just talking about making a different web service. Indeed, that's one of the last things we do. We're talking about looking at the end-to-end process and going, how could this thing be radically different but appropriate for a digital age? I mean, we've done this once before in government. One of the reasons we have those forms is that because they were the move, if you like, from the post-war clerical age up to the sort of age of automation, which we had in the late 60s and early 70s. So places like Long Benton and Newcastle still have areas called D68A, which was the name of the form that we gave it in 1940-something that became another part of a building in 1970-something, and now we're thinking, let's make that a website. So we have to think differently about how we do it, but it's a great question. And that's why we need these skills, and to start thinking differently about the very fundamental nature of some of our transactions. So. Are we trying to change the procurement processes which can take up to a year? Yes, we have done some, and we continue to do the others. So it's a work in progress. So the first thing I want to say is we have taken a long time, 2 decades, to engineer ourselves into this slightly ludicrous position. So it's not going to happen overnight. But our Minister, Francis Maud, is on the record saying that that game is changing. I'll tell you a few ways how we've done it. Obviously, from a technology point of view, we've brought in the G Cloud, which has been presented over there, and that's really for commodity services. It's on version 3. I don't think it's perfect yet, but it's a start. We're trying to look towards commissioning rather than procurement. And I wanted to say it by today, but very soon a new framework will be in place called the Digital Service Framework, which is aimed at precisely those companies who probably could provide stuff in a heartbeat rather than doing a very large procurement as a service, yes. And that will be out in the next few months. Absolutely, yeah. Now that will be on to be a cloud-based service, yes, but that's really for more bespoke services, products and skills, whereas G-Cloud is for commodity services like hosting. Okay, we've got a long way to go, right? But when we have, a parliamentary report said last January that I think we have over 80% of our supply chain in the hands of a small number of organisations and label it an oligopoly, that's a very big supply chain that we have to unpick and get the innovation in. There's going to be a bit of messiness on the way, there always is. We need those big companies with those contracts to help us through that process. There's room in this for everyone, but we do have to get a more agile way of procuring and actually stop thinking about procurement. The problem with procurement actually is the word procurement, because if you procure once. But in the world we're in, which moves on user need all the time, you need to be able to commission and chop and change very quickly. So one other thing, that's also why we commission in much smaller volume and much smaller value, because you mitigate your risk that way. Will we have some small failures? Probably, but I'd rather have those small failures than massive IT problems that we have over several years. Sir?
You mentioned sprint as a terminology.
Yes.
Can you explain a bit more about what that is?
Sure, I mentioned it, I've neglected to put the slide up, so thank you for that. In January, we had an event called Sprint, where we announced the programme of transformation of the 25 services which I've outlined here. And in that event we had ministers and we had leading people transforming these services in departments, in people from Swansea and DVLA and elsewhere, presenting back to them. 100 days have elapsed since, so on July the 17th we have an event called Sprint Alpha, where we start to show the alphas. So I've shown you a couple of them today with RPA, but there are several more to show, and that'll be the first time we give a public release to some of those, because it's not really about us releasing those, it's about departments being able to get up on stage. And fortunately we can't do that here today because you have to listen to me, but it's about departments getting up and saying what they've done and how we've helped them to do that. And you'll see about 5 or 6 more of them then, and we'll have another event next January which I think will be called Sprint Beta, as they all get towards the beta stage. Thanks for asking. And thanks for that prompt. That was something I forgot to ask. Hello?
This is about the sort of transactional stuff.
Yes.
So the thing I'm interested in is what you're doing with policy teams across government departments, so their mindsets in the right place, so that whatever comes out in the future.
That's a great question. The question is what we do, how we work with policy teams. So one thing I neglected to say is through GovUK and also through the transactions, that the artificial separation of policy and delivery, which actually kills us, it's crackers, that we actually bring them together. So many, throughout GovUK and even now, there will be people working together, 20, 30 people from departments and policy people who are working, who understand policy quite deeply, saying, well, actually, as we, take your point, sir, as we move this from a form to a service, what does that mean for the policy? How does it work? So we don't sit at the centre going, well, we know how these policies work. We go, actually, we don't know that, but let's get the policy people in the room. One of the problems we have, I think, in government, which you may be picking up on, is this artificial distinction between, the policy world, that we have great ideas and we play intellectual gymnastics for a year, and then we say, oh, and we'll hand that to the delivery people. Now, in a digital world, that's just gone. You just don't do that. So, by sitting them in rooms full of people who question them and making them have that conversation, rather than getting the best out of their brains in long documents that no one's reading. Just getting them in the room. Having multidisciplinary teams which include policy people is absolutely critical to successful service delivery. We're not there yet, by the way, but it's a start. Any more? You've had enough of me, I'm sure. Okay, thanks very much for your time. Cheers.